Well, hello there.
Hi there. How's it going?
It's going fantastic. How are you, my fine feathered friend?
I am wonderful. I'm actually looking at the background on Teresa's video, and I can see that you have some things in common.
I,
Besides, you're both, obviously beauty pageant winners and former Bowflex,
Models? Yes, of course.
models, both of you, of course. But there's something else actually that's jumping out at me.
The
Can you see it? Do you see it?
yeah, yeah. The Japan and Hawaii. Love it.
Yeah, that's
That's,
right. That's right. That's right.
are you
Beautiful places.
there now? Are you there now?
I wish. No, I'm in Maryland dealing with 3 inches of snow, but it's okay because, back in the day when I lived in Japan, it was absolutely beautiful. And I always took a trip or two to Hawaii and got to lay out on some beaches out there and loved the whole spirit, the aloha spirit. So I miss it. You're lucky you grew up there. I'm jealous.
Yeah, yeah. Trust me, I live in Chicago. I miss it all the time.
You
By
went
the way,
polar opposites,
Yes,
tropical island to literally a popsicle in
yes,
the winter
ma'am.
times.
Yes, ma'am.
I meant to ask you, because a famous person went from Hawaii to Chicago. That's President Obama.
Mhm.
Did you and President Obama, do this together, like hand in hand? Did you hold
Did
hands?
we chill? No, we never chill. He would be a lot of fun to chill out with.
Yeah.
He's a little older than I am, not by much, but a little bit. And he went to Punahou, I went to Kaiser. Yeah, different,
Uh-huh.
different world. But
All right. Well, if it makes, I've never been to Japan. I'm looking forward to going one day. I've been to Hawaii multiple times, but Japan, one of these places that I am hell bent. I'm going to say hell bent to go visit before too long. So I'm looking forward to it.
yeah.
Maybe
And
Therese can
Definitely
give me some
should.
recommendations, places to
Absolutely. And
go, things to see.
I still speak the language a little bit too.
You're
So I may be
kidding.
able to
You
kind of give you
speak the
some words.
language?
Yes, Scotia. Yeah. When I
Wow.
lived there, I was pretty fluent during the time when I lived there. And I pick up languages really easily, actually. And so it's a lot easier when you live there and you're submersed in it. Like everywhere you go, you're saying katakana, hiragana. I purposely lived off base and had an apartment with only Japanese neighbors. That was intentional. So that way I could talk to them. But what backfired was I would go and try to talk to them. They'd be like, "Oh, speak to me in English." And I'm like, "No, I don't want to speak to you in English. I want to speak to you in Japanese." And so what ended
It's
up
very
happening
common.
was, yeah, we did
Yeah,
a
that's what
trade-off.
happens. Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. You have to do a trade-off. Exactly.
Yep.
I oftentimes, whenever I visit Israel, family there wanted to speak to me in English to practice their English. And I was like, no, 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 I need to practice my Hebrew.
And
Exactly.
Grace,
Yeah.
we'll quiz Tao real quick because I took Japan. Well, of course, I took Japanese when I was in high school, but also, just living there, you learn a lot. So, Tao, what do you think Makuro Naruto means?
You know what? I would not even want to venture a guess. Go ahead and tell me. Because
McDonald's.
my guess will most likely be embarrassing. Go ahead.
McDonald's.
McDonald's. How do you say that again?
Makuro Naruto.
Huh. Interesting.
Yep.
I kind of
Ikura
hear it.
desu ka? Makura ikura desu ka? Where's the McDonald's? You know?
All right. Well, how about we tell people about
Who
our
we're
guest,
dealing with today.
PJ. Exactly. And
Yes. So we have, as everyone has already been introduced to her, kind of, is the wonderful Miss Terace Garnier. God, I already messed up her name. Terace Garnier, who we're thrilled to have. She is truly a remarkable individual. She's a journalist, an advocate, a philanthropist, and an entrepreneur whose life story is a testament to both resilience as well as versatility. Raised as a military child, Therese served in the U.S. Air Force as an AFN reporter, anchor, and radio show host. Following her service, she earned her master's in broadcast and digital journalism from very warm Syracuse University, and then made her mark as a
the
journalist.
colors are warm.
And they are orange and blue. And made her mark as a journalist covering major events for Fox News Channel and becoming Newsy's first Pentagon correspondent. Beyond journalism, Therese is a champion of fitness, including a time as a Bowflex fitness model, which, ironically enough, I also am a fitness model. I'm always on the before pictures. I'm the before model.
The before model. I love that.
As well as advocacy and artistry. Therese has also ventured into pageantry, earning the title of Miss International World last year, and using this platform to mentor as well as inspire others. Recently, she published a very important memoir, No Longer Silent, which is a deeply personal book. Therese recounts her healing process from childhood trauma and from sexual assault during her military service. She advocates for awareness and understanding around trauma as well as assault. And we'll definitely dive into this book today. As an entrepreneur, she's a master craftsman, owner of Live Edge Artistry, making beautiful Edgewood tables, which I'm sure we're going to see. To those of you who have no idea what a what live edge furniture is, it refers to a style of furniture where the craft person incorporates the natural edge of wood into the design of the piece. It's beautiful stuff. It takes a lot of artistry to do. And, it's just one of her many, many talents. Therese, it is an honor to have you with us here on the Braving Business podcast.
Well, it's an honor to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to share my story. And I do have a lot of things that I do. So let's get it going. Because we might be here a while. Yeah. I'm just kidding. I'm not bragging.
We got it all in. Therese, it's really an honor to have you here. And you have had a super interesting life, a diverse life. You've also tried on different hats, different careers, which is increasingly something that people do. I'd love for you to tell your story to the audience and maybe share what drove you to explore so many different paths. You went from military service, journalism, competing in a pageant, authoring a book, starting a business. You're doing all these things. What's been the path that you took to here, and what is it about this path that made you so curious about trying so many different things?
Well, what's so interesting is they all tie into each other. It's just the way that you have to look at it. And so initially, as a kid, I always wanted to be an actress. And it's actually funny. My dad said a couple times he walked in the house when I was like 7 or 8, and he heard me talking to myself in the bathroom for hours. And he thought it was the weirdest thing ever. And so one day he opened the door and I was practicing accents in the mirror. So, every now and then I'll break out in a British accent, or, my country accent will come out, and it comes out really bad, And so he thought I was very strange. And I can understand why people would think that. But I wanted to be an actress. And so growing up, I was always into art. I competed in art competitions every year, and those two kind of tie into each other. Once I was old enough to start deciding what I wanted to do career-wise, I said, I want to be an artist. And I went to art school. And then after a year of that, I said, yep, nope, I don't want to do that because I don't want to be, most artists don't become famous until after they're dead. And I didn't want to be a starving artist. And so at that point, I said, well, you know what, maybe I should just go back to school, figure out kind of what I want to do now. I'll go into communications. And so I started pursuing my degree initially for my bachelor's in communications. And in the midst of that, I said, I'm going to move to Japan. So I moved to Japan and I'm going to school there in Japan. And then I started interning at a local TV station. And the reason why I did is because I said, you know what, I'm still interested in that TV side, not the acting per se, but at least with this, I'll be able to give people information and also still kind of be on TV. So I interned at the local station, Iwakuni television there. And I did that for, I want to say maybe...
How old were you at the time?
At that time, that was in 2009. So I had to have been 20. I think I was 20. Mm-hmm. And so I was going to school and working at the local marketing station on Iwakuni. So that's the Marine Corps base there. I was a photographer. So I did a lot of photography around the base while also interning at their local TV station. And so I got to learn radio. I got to learn how to edit a news story. And actually my first, I guess, helping the actual radio show hosts, I was kind of, I don't want to say co-anchoring, but kind of helping them set up for the show. And that first opportunity I had, I actually helped them interview Tommy Davidson, comedian Tommy Davidson. I still have his signature and his photo with his signature on it. I was just looking at it yesterday, actually. And so that was really cool, kind of preparing the show host for that interview. And then afterwards, he kind of cracked some jokes. He was like, oh, I don't want to be seen with you because you probably got some crazy Marine daddy that's out hiding in the bushes with a sniper rifle, ready to shoot me at any moment's notice, and he actually incorporated that in his comedy skits. So that was really entertaining to be on that base and have my dad seeing his show, a huge fan.
Is Tommy Davidson related to Pete Davidson, or is that just an altogether different comic?
Totally.
Altogether
I
different
don't
comic.
think,
Okay.
I don't think there is any. If it is, it's like way down the
A third
line.
cousin, twice removed. Got it. No
Yeah,
problem.
kind of thing,
Mhm.
if it is. And so that was just really cool. My dad and I grew up watching In Living Color and all of the other movies and things that he had been in. And so just to introduce my dad and him kind of making fun of my dad, that was pretty great. So while I was there, I said, you know, I was researching and I saw that the Air Force had a program for broadcast journalists. And so I said, well, let me look into that. And so I did some research. I went and talked to a recruiter, went through the whole process, and ended up getting the position, so to speak. I got sent to basic training, and then they sent me right back to Japan, which is so amazing. So I spent another 3.5 or so years in Japan. And during that time, I was a radio show host of Eagle 810. I was DJ Fructis, and I had a show from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. I had over 75,000 listeners across the Kanto Plain or throughout all of Tokyo. And so I did that in the mornings. And then in the afternoons later on, it started off where I was just doing radio. But then my shows became so popular that I started asking them if I could anchor the TV portion of our office as well. And so in the mornings, I would do radio. And in the evenings, I would anchor. And so fell in love with it. And, you know, I got to experience a lot of things in Japan. I was a huge volunteer. As you can see, my little shadow box right here for Japan. I also created a video that went viral asking Oprah to be my mentor. And it went viral. And CNN saw it. And so while I was in the States doing pre-deployment training, they actually flew me out to Atlanta. I got to tour the Bureau. And who would have ever thought that a decade later, I would be a news correspondent, a national news correspondent. And for someone my age, that's not normal, and it's very rare. So had I not posted that video, I may not have become the first Pentagon correspondent or national correspondent. So, but the moral of that story is Oprah never saw that video. She never saw it.
The moral of that story, if we think about the context of what we've heard on this podcast, is how often that first big breakthrough is about putting something out there, being courageous, not knowing the outcome, but being prepared to put yourself out there, potentially being embarrassed because you know what? No, it's possible no one would have watched the video, or you would have been you posted it for yourself, but you posted it, other people saw it, and there you are now. There you are now.
And the funniest story about that, people were like, don't post that video. That's so dumb. You're not going anywhere. No one's going to see it. You're just going to embarrass yourself. Like I had so many people who were like totally against it. And I've always lived with the mindset that you miss every shot you don't take.
Yep.
I'm going to try it. If it works, great. And if it don't, okay, learning lesson next, you know, so I'm glad I did as well, you know.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said about that, because a lot of times, you know, one of the things that I tell my kids all the time is you don't get what you don't ask for. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you don't put yourself out there, you're not gonna experience what you want. Naysayers are a dime a dozen. Everyone can be a naysayer, right? But those that are actually generating a life and getting out there and doing things, well, I mean, you just got to go do it. I think it's very commendable that you've done all that. I also think it's amazing that you go to a recruiter, you're like, hey, I want to do broadcast journalism, and then they bring you into the military and they give you a job in broadcast journalism. That is, from everything I've heard, it's always like, oh yeah, you can fly shit, you can fly whatever you want, and then you come. Now you're filling up air tires on a plane, like, instead of flying them. So good for you, right? Obviously, your talent shone through, which is really, really cool. So good for you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been.
What's interesting, we look at you, and this is the part of the story that I important for our audience to hear. It's easy to look at you and what you've accomplished and assume you've kind of had it easy, right? You talked about, hey, you traveled, you went to Japan as a 20-year-old. A lot of people that would feels impossible to do. You took some risks, but the reality is it wasn't a straight shot, right? You had many challenges. And we're going to get into some of that when we talk about your book, both what happened to you as a child, what happened to you in the military. But before we get into that, the journey you took, I was absolutely amazed to find out that while you were pursuing your career in journalism, you actually had a period of time where you were homeless, which just blew my mind. Would love to hear about that. How did that happen? I mean, what can you tell us about that part?
Well, it's pretty interesting because for a long time, I didn't want to tell people about it, because when you say homelessness, the first thing people think is, well, what did you do wrong? She must be a drug dealer. She must have been on drugs. She must have, usually a lot of situations where people end up in that situation is because of something they did. However, in this circumstance, it was not anything that I did, actually. I had been, at the time I was working in Florida, I was in local news, and I had accepted a job here in DC with Newsy. Now, during that time, I had packed up all my stuff, and in order to ship it up here, it was like $6,000 or $7,000 to ship all my stuff up. So all my savings went to shipping my stuff up here. And once I started making plans, I reached out to a few friends who I was in the military with, and I said, hey, I'm moving up to the area. Would it be possible to come stay with you for a month or two? I hope to purchase a home, so I just need a place to stay for a couple months until I can purchase this home. And at the time, I had two people get back to me. I had one girl that I was stationed with. She was renting out a bunch of rooms. So she said, you can come stay with me. But then I also talked to my other friend as the backup. And she was like, yeah, I have a room that's available. And then I have a friend that also has a room that's available if you need it. So I'm like, great. I have 3 options. Perfect. I'm trying to be prepared, because that's my military mentality. Always be prepared. So I'm driving up to DC to move in with the girl I was stationed with a while ago. And I get to her home, and let's just say the conditions were not conditions where I could live there. I don't want to embarrass her or anything, but it was a health hazard, so to speak. And so after driving 23 hours straight from West Palm Beach to DC, I slept in my car because I had nowhere else to go. I had a U-Haul attached to my car, and now I'm like, I don't know where I can stay. So let me reach out to those 2 other friends. Unfortunately, the 2 other friends just had 2 people move into those rooms, and they got to make money. So I get that. So I'm like, oh crap, I don't know anyone here. Like, most of the people I know are gone. They're not here anymore. And so I basically lived in my car for a few weeks. And during this time, I'm reporting to work. I'm doing my job. And then they had like a gym there. So I would go to the gym sometimes to wash up, or there was a park that I would go to, and there was like a hotel there, and I would go and say I wanted to use the bathroom, and then I would go out and wash up in the bathroom and then go back and stay in my car. I did that for a couple of weeks, and a friend of mine found out that that was going on, because again, I'm embarrassed. I'm a national correspondent living out of my car. Like, who wants to go around saying that? Not to mention I was in the military, and I didn't want to be known as a homeless veteran. And so my friend found out, and he at that time was living in I think it was like 360 square foot studio apartment. And also he hates dogs, but he said, I cannot have you living on the street. That's unacceptable. No, I don't care if you have a dog, we'll make it work. And so bless his heart, he helped me move in with him. And so I slept on the couch, and his bed was like 2 inches away from the couch because it's a studio apartment, and my dog's there. And we did that for about a month. So at that point I was couch surfing. Once that ended, thank God I was able to finally move into the home that I was trying to purchase. And then I think it was maybe a few weeks later, up to a month later, he moved in with me, and he lived on the first floor. He had his own space and everything, so he could save up to get his own house. So he lived with me for about 6 months, paid off a ton of debt, saved up a lot of money, and then bought his own home. And so that goes to show you, showing kindness like that, how it just came back full circle. He didn't have to let me come stay with him, and I stayed with him for a month, but thank God he showed me that kindness, and I was able to turn it back around and show him the same kindness. And that's why I'm so big on paying it forward. When people help me, I pay it forward, and I don't ever ask for anything in return, because God's going to bless me at the end of the day. But I want to make sure that I can be a blessing to others, because I've had so many people help me and not ask for anything in return.
So that is like the epitome of hustle, right? And struggle, right? Like you're living out of your car with a U-Haul. Like, did you keep that U-Haul trailer for all those weeks?
I did, because it had my stuff in it.
That had to have been expensive.
I couldn't unhitch it. It was one of those small ones. It was like a 5x8. So it was only like, I don't know, like $30 a week or something like that. But it was a pain having to drive everywhere, and then being concerned someone might break into it and steal my stuff out, So yeah, it was a lot.
But also showing up to work with that attached, and you are right, because now you got to take up two parking spots. And
gosh.
You're a national reporter and Pentagon correspondent. Like,
At the time, I wasn't a Pentagon correspondent yet.
okay.
I wasn't yet.
Not-
So
so
that came later.
national reporter though, right?
Mhm.
You're on air. What was that like? Like, did it feel like, I don't know, like clearly, there's something, you know, in the back of your mind where you're like, all right, you know, you're not totally settled in many ways of that word. Like that must have been pretty difficult.
The difficult part was when I actually lived in my car. That was the difficult part for me because you can't really sleep like that. You know, you have people walking past the car. Now you're wondering, are they going to break into the car? Are they going to mug me? Like every sound you hear, you're waking up and you're like, what's happening? You know, and you can't really get really good sleep with that. And you're always scared. I had my dog with me, so he would wake up and bark, you know, if he saw someone. And that was the scary part for me.
So Therese, the part I'm curious about, and it's a topic that I have experienced myself, is the feeling of questioning whether I belong, right? So some people call it the imposter syndrome. So here you are, you're a national reporter, you're in the process of trying to establish your career. You also are aware, as your colleagues are not, that you are not settled, that you're living out of a car. Did you feel like you're an imposter? Did you feel like you belonged, or did you have any doubts about whether this was in fact a place that you had every right to be in?
If anything, I felt like I belonged more than the others because in my mind, I'm overcoming a lot of stuff while still doing my job and doing it good and not complaining despite the circumstances and still treating everyone how they want to be treated and trying to focus on all the positives. To me, I was more than qualified to be there because I was able to overcome all those things. And they will maybe find out once they see this interview, didn't even know that I was homeless. So if anything, that encouraged me more and just made me feel more proud of myself. The fact that I was able to do all those things with all those circumstances stacked up against me, to be honest.
Do you feel people would have treated you differently had they known that you were living in your car?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Without a doubt. Absolutely. And it wouldn't have been in a good way either.
As Confucius once said, you go, girl. That's awesome.
Quote.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it's a blessing, but and it's a blessing in a sense that now I've been able to share my story and shed light on. It's a huge issue for veteran women, and especially ones with children. Can you imagine being homeless but having a child with you as well? And so the blessing that came out of that was not only was I able to overcome it, but now I can shed a light on a group of people that most don't even know exist. I know a lot of women who had the same situation. They lived out of their car, they went to work, did their job, came back and was sleeping in their car that night. I know a lot of women. So a lot of people don't realize how often or how prevalent it is. And so I was able to turn that into a platform to shed a light and actually start helping people who were going through that. So one thing you will learn about me, I've had a lot of horrible things happen to me, but I always try to focus on the positive. I try to learn what lessons there are to be learned from it. And I also try to turn it around to help other people, because if I can help somebody not go through what I went through, then maybe it was all worth it.
Yeah, I think Therese, we've talked a little bit offline, and I connected you with with someone in my life that I think you'd have a lot in common with, because I do believe, and I, as a person, has actually also suffered sexual abuse as a child and has been through difficult things. I do think that being able to talk about these things and making them less taboo and making people feel less shame is both something that gives you peace and relief, and obviously empowers others. And let's actually use that as an opportunity to talk about your book.
Excellent.
So the book, No Longer Silent, which you published this year, if you want to hold it up for the camera, that would be great. Wonderful. Great cover photo. It's a deeply personal memoir. You wrote about very, very difficult truths from your childhood, as well as your time in the Air Force. I'd love for you to share with our audience that part of your story, and what prompted you to decide, you know what, I'm going to write a book.
So I'll give you snippets because I don't want to give everything, because I want people to definitely check out the book for sure.
Go check out the book. It's a great book. Very interesting and very quick read. It did not take me very long to read. I read over a few hours on a week.
That's what most people
I enjoyed
told
it so
me.
much. Yeah, I enjoyed it so much. I put it down. I basically started reading it. I intended to read about an hour. I ended up reading for about 2.5, and I finished the book.
And it's I think that's what compelled me to write the book. One, I have such a unique background that I don't think people understand. They only see the end result, but they don't see how I got there. And to be honest, I feel that my trauma is what led me to where I am. What sparked the desire to want to write the book? Initially, the pandemic hit, and I wanted to start exploring how my childhood traumas were impacting me currently. Because whether people like to believe it or not, or don't realize it, what happens to you as a kid, especially when it comes to trauma, will impact you as an adult, whether you know it or not. So I wanted to explore that. So I've been going to counseling since, I want to say 2012, 2013. I'm a firm believer in it. I think everyone should go, whether they think they should or not. I think they should. And so I was speaking to my counselor and I said, I want to start deep diving into this because the trauma that happened to me as a kid was so horrifying and horrific that doctors say there's like I don't know what the definition is of it, but basically there's a switch in my head that switched. So literally, I have no emotions towards it. I have no emotional connection. I can talk about it as if I'm watching a movie and I'm telling you about a script of a movie. And they said that my brain did that to protect me from going crazy, basically, because of the stuff I had experienced. So there was always a fear to ever even explore what had happened to me because I was scared that was going to make me snap, basically. My counselor said, no, I think we can go about talking about it and you'll be fine and we can heal from it. And so we started exploring it and I started journaling during that process. And as we went along, I said, I'm just going to journal about it and this will be healing. And then, as a news reporter, I'm also still covering things that are going on in the world. And when I saw what happened to the Fort Hood soldier, Vanessa Guillen, that's when it hit me. No, this has to be a book. I'm calling it No Longer Silent because this has to stop. This is unacceptable that when our service members are being sexually harassed, it was being swept under the rug. They get retaliated, they get hazed. And then the only time the national news wants to cover it, especially if it's a woman of color, is if she dies. So in that process, I said, let me write this book because I want to spread the word about this and show that we are human beings. We are real people with feelings. You see a service member, you think of a secret agent, you think hardcore, and, we have to put on this persona that I'm tough and I don't cry. And a lot of times we feel that way because we have to keep up with the men and not show weakness. But we are, at the end of the day, human. And
Sure.
These things do happen. And for the military to sweep it under the rug or, pretend it doesn't happen. We signed away our lives to serve our country, to protect other people in this nation. Why should I fear that my coworker may rape me and you may let them get away with it? I didn't sign up for that. I didn't sign up for my own battle buddy who's supposed to protect me in battle and give his life for mine and vice versa if it comes to it, to be concerned. I was trained to wear a necklace with a knife on it. And they told me during pre-deployment training, wear it in the shower. And whenever you shower, you face outward because your own coworkers will attack you. In a war zone, I got to worry about my coworkers trying to rape and attack me and the enemy. What is that? And that was a part of the training. So I said, you know what? Enough's enough. I've had it. I'm not being silent about this because the longer you're silent about these things, the people that are doing these things will continue to do it. And then I feel like I'm being complicit. So I wrote the book and, so far, a lot of people have gravitated to it because it's not just for sexual assault survivors. It's for people who have kids. It's for, aunts and uncles and people with cousins. It talks about, dealing with child rape and abuse, gun violence against children, domestic violence against children. It talks about spousal abuse. And then it also talks about being assaulted in the military. And it goes into my whole background of what my life's journey led me to those situations and how I was able to survive them and turn them around again to try to help other people, which I'm a firm believer that the only reason why God allowed all that stuff to happen to me is because he knew I was strong enough to survive it. And he knew I would use that to help other people.
Well, good for you
This,
for making that conclusion. I mean, I think that ultimately we have two options. It's something we've talked about in this podcast, something I believe in firmly. We have the opportunity to tell our story, and we can tell our story as if we are a victim, or we can tell the story as if we are the hero of the story, and that our purpose is to view whatever it is that happened in our lives as not happening us, but happening for us. And it sounds like you very much have that mindset.
I do. It's happening for us. What can I learn from this? And what can I do to hopefully spare others from having to ever experience or go through this?
yeah,
And honestly, it's been a blessing.
I totally love the fact that you are the anti-victim, right? Like you're not, a lot of people have gone through terrible things, absolutely, but not many people are able to turn it around and use it as a driving force for the positive, which is extremely commendable. And I think it's amazing.
Well, that's one, I'm glad you made that point, because that's one of the things in my book that it focuses on. Everybody can do it.
Yeah. Well,
They
we
just don't
agree.
know
We
how.
agree.
And so
It's-
I
it's-
want to encourage others that this is how you can do it. You can do this too. You can turn your pain around, take control of it, take your power back. And if you so choose to do so, you can help others. And this is how you can do it.
yeah. And so so writing a book, first of all, is a daunting venture, obviously. So yeah, I can tell by your eyes bugging out. It's a
DJ
daunting
knows
venture.
a thing or two about it. He is married to
No.
an international best-selling author. So
Yes, yes. So
There you go.
I know how intense that process can be.
Mhm.
I can never do it because I can't even spell. But what did
That's what spell check's for.
Well, that's true. Thank you. Thank you. Wow, my whole future's laid out in front of me.
there you go.
What did you discover about yourself, during this process of writing this book?
When people ask me, why did you become a journalist back in the day? I said, oh, it's because I love helping people. And that's legitimately what I thought. But once I started writing my book and deep diving into my childhood stuff, I realized that, yes, I do like helping people, but why? Not just because of what happened to me. What I discovered was the issue was my inner child, especially when I was going through the traumatic incidents as a child. I told people what was happening to me and they ignored me. They didn't believe me. Even the man who was raping me at 5, 6, 7 years old said, go on, tell whoever you want. No one's going to believe you. And guess what? No one did. So for me, it was actually a desire to be acknowledged. It was actually a desire to be seen. It was a desire to look. I'm a reporter. I have 3 sources for my stories. There's no way you can question whether I'm lying about this or not because I got sources. I come with receipts. And I didn't realize it. It was, I wanted people to believe me and believe that when I say something, I'm telling the truth. How deep is that? It's like, wow. And so through that writing process, I learned so much about myself that I just did not know. Here it is, things that I would do where I just like being nice. And it was like, but no, there's another side to why I'm driven to do it. It's not that I just like to do it. I feel an insatiable desire to do it. There's a difference. Almost an unhealthy desire. And a lot of things I did, I actually ended up becoming a workaholic. And I enjoyed the thrill of always working, always proving that I'm good at this, always proving I'm good at that. And that's why I jumped from so many different things to another, because I would get an idea. I want to do this. And I would master it instantly, be like, okay, I'm bored, next thing. And then move on to the next thing, right? But it was a desire to prove to people why you should love me, why you should accept what I'm saying, why you should believe me. And so I learned a lot. And I hope a lot of other people, even if they're just journaling, they'll do that as well, because they will learn a lot about themselves just in writing down their feelings.
There are a couple of things you had said a little bit earlier in the interview that really resonated with me. As someone that survived childhood sexual assault, I did not speak of it until I was in my 20s. I only did at that time because the person that had sexually assaulted me, frankly, raped me, was a cousin. And I discovered that he was being accused of doing it to his children, and I knew it was true. And I felt I needed to speak up, and I did and he did end up going to jail, or prison, although he did not serve nearly as long a time, and never apologized to me and never acknowledged the truth. But what
Send
was
me his
interesting,
address. I'll visit.
well, it's a long and very interesting story. But maybe more to the point, there are a couple of things he said that resonated with me. One was that for the longest time I could tell the story, but I was distant from the story. I didn't, I would tell you what happened. I recalled what happened, but probably to save myself, my brain didn't allow it to be more story. So that really resonates with me. The second thing is what you just said, which is that when you are treated like you are garbage, which is what you are experiencing when someone uses you for their sexual gratification.
You're an object.
Yeah, and you're an object, not even an object. You're nothing. You're absolutely nothing. It really damages your self-worth, and it creates a situation, and I'm not a therapist, so this is my layman's view of it, but it creates a situation where you struggle to believe you're worthwhile and you struggle to believe you're worthy of being loved. Even if you feel that you're a great person and you're doing great things and people tell you that you are, somewhere deep inside, there is that issue. And I dealt with that for many, many years. Not even, frankly, I wasn't even completely cognizant of the fact that what I was really struggling with was that I wasn't sure that I was worthy of being loved. And I'm glad you're talking about that. I think that that's a really, really important thing to recognize. When people think about the victims of sexual abuse and going through that process and needing to recover from that, they might think that this is a psychic injury and you need to overcome the trauma of what you experienced. That is indeed part of that, but a huge part of that is believing, essentially changing the story from a story where you were not someone that was worthy at all, and you are someone that's very worthy, and the person that chose to, again, use you, absolutely no way, shape, or form speaks to your worth as an individual and whether you're worthy of being loved. And that's a journey, and it takes a minute, and frankly, it takes years, especially if you're traumatized and not confronting it. And I think for a lot of people that have gone through these types of experiences, the hardest part, beyond accepting that this happened to you and that it is more than a story that you're telling at a distance, is to recognize, that the impact it has had on you is usually far, far greater and far more far-reaching than maybe you might have imagined. I, for the longest time, thought I wasn't as impacted by it, but in fact, I was.
And that's what I had to discover. And I know you asked earlier to give a little snippet from my book, and I would like to share that, as a young 5-6-year-old girl, and moving with my mother at the time, and I was introduced to her boyfriend, and I now know he was grooming me, but at the time I didn't realize that's what was going on. It's so important for a lot of parents to be very careful, first of all, who they allow around their children, including family. But in this situation, before that, I had been living with my grandmother and my father. I kind of went back and forth between all three. And so, they thought they were leaving me in the hands of a, normal adult that doesn't do weird things to children, right? And so it started off with a whole grooming, and they take the truth and twist it. So one of the things he would do is he would tell me, your family doesn't love you. See, they never call you and they never talk to you, and only I love you. And now you're growing up with this demented view of what love is, because you really don't know what it is, because for these 2 years, you've been told that this is what love is, and it isn't. So he would say, only I love you. I only do these things. And it went from small little things to graphic. And I just remember it got so bad. I remember I was like handcuffed to the bed, and he had stopped feeding me because he got mad that I wouldn't do what he said. And I remember just laying there looking up at the ceiling, and I remember saying, God, please take me to be with the angels. I don't want to be here anymore. This is too painful. And I just remember thinking every day, I'd just rather be with God and the angels than be here being tortured every day.
Thank God, Terace, that you are here with us. I'm so sorry you went through that.
Yeah.
But thank goodness that you persevered, and, that it is hard to say that something like that is something that happened for you. It is truly, truly hard to say. I generally believe in that. But I believe in all probability that didn't happen for you. That happened to you, and you had the strength and you have the strength to turn that into something that is not a drag on you, and hopefully an opportunity to uplift others. I commend you on choosing to be courageous and talk about it, because it's certainly harrowing to even hear about.
Yeah. And it's, but I think it's important you have to put a face to these things, because if you don't, anybody can just kind of nonchalantly say, oh, statistically, this many kids get molested by their close family members. But when you put a face to it, you show that child, hold on, give me a second. You show that child. And we have so many people who are like, protect the children. You show this.
Yep.
That was a little girl who all she wanted to do was make bracelets and chase butterflies and make mud pies outside and play with bugs, because I was a tomboy, and play with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I feel like a certain extent my childhood was taken away, but that's okay. I think I'm now as an adult letting that inner child come out more often. And so I'm getting that opportunity, but it's...
Well, let's talk about that inner child, and I'm going to pivot it. It's kind of hard to pivot from this topic to another topic, but we'll use that segue. Go ahead, PJ. Sure.
I'll keep the segue for a second, but I just wanted to say it is terrible, and it is shocking how prevalent this issue is. And I've actually only shared this with my wife, but I also went through something with a trusted person when I was a child. It was my doctor. And I used to hate going to, I never really understood why, but only recently, I'm 55, right? So I dealt with this my whole life. And then like within the last few years, I realized, oh, this is terrible, right? What happened was not the norm, because then when I'm sending my son to the doctor, I'm like, hold on, he shouldn't be in there alone with him. Like there was real fear in me, and it took me a long time to try to process that out. So I'm just saying all that to say this isn't an issue that should be swept under the rug. This is something that happens to way more people. It doesn't matter about the background. You're from Israel. I'm from Florida. And, Terace, you grew up, I don't know where you grew up, but you grew
all
up
over.
all over, right? And unfortunately, it rears its head, and it needs to be addressed in so many ways. So I am very thankful for you and Tal to be able to talk about it, and to be able to say, hey, not only is this supremely shitty, and not only can you survive from it, but the fact that you're going ahead and you're doing something proactive about it, and you're sharing your story, and you're no longer silent, and you're really out there and doing that. I can't clap loudly enough for that. So I just wanted to say that. And
well, first and foremost, it takes a certain level of vulnerability to even be able to speak about that. And I know, especially for men, that is very difficult. So first and foremost, for both of you, thank you for sharing your stories, because again, we have to get people to start speaking up about the injustices that they endured. And to both of you, I'm so sorry you had to experience that from a doctor, someone who you're supposed to be able to trust, and then from a family member. Like, these are the things that I wanted to make sure I pointed out and focused on. And also, too, surprisingly, a lot of people that get my book, I thought more women were going to buy my book than anything, but it's actually been more men, which that shows you that it's happening a lot more than people like to admit, to young boys and men. And they're trying to navigate this world with living with the shame of thinking they did something wrong and they deserve that. I can't imagine as a man having that on you and trying to be the supporter, the head of the household, while also trying to deal with those feelings. And so I commend you both for, one, sharing that, and two, doing your parts right now by bringing awareness to this, because this is where the healing starts. We start speaking about it. So thank you for trusting me and opening up about that. And I think it's such a beautiful thing, because that's the first step. And I think everyone needs to take that first step. and that will be how they heal.
Yeah, well, PJ, I thank you for sharing that with us and with the audience. Pretty profound. I agree with you, actually, Therese. I think it is a lot more prevalent with boys and men than you would think. I happen to know of several other people in my immediate orbit that have experienced it as well. I'll just leave it there. There was a very interesting movie that I saw recently. We had Larry Kazanoff, the famed Hollywood producer of movies like Platoon and Dirty Dancing and Die Hard, and we had a conversation about the kind of movies they're making nowadays. And I mentioned that I've recently found some movies that have really profoundly touched me. Unfortunately, he put me on the spot and asked me for names. I couldn't think of one. But one that did, and it's actually relevant to this topic, is the movie Sound of Freedom. If you haven't seen that, look for that movie. It's a movie about child sexual trafficking, and it's a true story of an incredible American hero by the name of Tim Ballard, former federal agent who dedicated his life to saving as many children as possible. So it's a hard, like I said, it's going to be a hard segue. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. Our audience will forgive me. But you mentioned that, part of the process of reinventing yourself or moving on is to access some of that childhood exuberance, childlike exuberance that maybe you didn't quite get to experience. And I wonder how much of that may have led you to pursue the pageant and becoming Miss International World, which is amazing. This just happened. Not like, we're not talking years and years ago. This was last year. Yeah. What prompted you to compete? And how do you balance demands of being Miss International World with both your personal and professional commitments?
Well, so funny story. Through the process of me writing this book and discovering myself, I remember last year in January, I always had a trajectory. I have to do A, B, C, and D to get to this, this goal. And so in January of last year, I said, you know what, from now on, I'm just going to say yes to stuff that I never thought I would say yes to. I'm going to say yes to stuff because I just need to explore different ways to do. There's multiple ways to get to your end goal. And I can't just have my mind set that this is the only way to do it. So prior to that, I had already taken an interest in pageants because the one particular one I was looking into, their focus was homeless veteran women. So that's kind of how I got into it. In January, as the person who's going to say yes to everything, I think after that pageant, I said, I'm never doing pageants ever again. I'm never doing it again. No. And so January came along and I had, people inviting me to do different things. And so I said, okay, sure. Yeah, I'll try that out. I got invited to do a runway show. I'd never done a runway show before. And during that time, I had started doing a little bit of modeling before that, just for fun. It wasn't for any company specifically. And so I did this runway show. And as a result, it was like I went from never doing a runway show, first time ever, to the next one I did was in a bikini, which that takes a lot of confidence to literally go in front of a crowd of people walking a runway in a bikini, mind you, that being your only second time. And you're with tons of people who've been doing this for years. That's a lot. And all the people there were like, what, that was your second time? Like, we thought you had been doing this for a while. So I was like, thank you guys. I really appreciate that. Cause I thought I looked like, not what you're describing, and I'm being hard on myself in that instance. And so it led from runway shows to I'm doing videos of me cycling on my Bowflex Velocore. And I'm goofy at heart. I'm a goofy person. So I started letting that come out more. And so I'm like, you know what? I love Family Guy. I'm gonna make a video with Family Guy on the screen of the bike, and I'm gonna mimic it and be Lois. And so I had her voice going and I was mimicking her. And I kid you not, that night I posted it. And the next day I woke up with a message from Bowflex saying, hey, can you do some commercials for us? And I'm like, yes, absolutely. And so it just literally one thing led to another. And then I was being interviewed by Muscle and Fitness. I've been interviewed by them twice. After that, I was on one magazine cover, which you probably can't see it, but it's up here on my wall. Then I ended up being in 3 other magazines. So that was 4 total. And it was just because I just started saying yes to stuff that I normally never would have said yes to. I didn't picture myself ever being a model. That was like the last thing I ever pictured myself doing, or walking the runway and doing those things. And I'm glad I did it. It was a great experience. And so that was that inner child coming out. I'm not going to say no to it. Let's just explore it. And if I don't like it, I won't do it again. But at least I can say I did it. And look where it's led. I mean, I was just at the White House about a week ago talking to them about my book. 6 months ago, I went from saying yes to a runway show to I'm at the White House speaking to White House officials about my book. Whoa, you know, and it was all because I decided I'm no longer going to dedicate my life making everyone else rich. I'm not going to spend working 9 to 5 to make someone else rich. I'm going to take all that time and pour it into myself. And that's why I started focusing on my mental health, my physical health, what I want to do, what I needed to be happy. Because I think at the end of the day, that's what we all are looking for. What makes me happy? And I think a lot of people think they know what makes them happy, or they may know, they just don't do it. But I think a lot of people know what it is, and they refuse to do it because of fear or other things. I swam with sharks. I literally went to the Maldives. I said, you know, I've always wanted to go. Yeah, let me book a ticket in 2 weeks.
We're going to talk about them. We're going to talk about the Maldives. I want to talk about your friend, the hermit crab, but let's we'll get to last. I promise.
Okay.
It's on our agenda. Yeah. Let's talk business a little bit.
Okay.
DJ, go ahead.
Yeah. So, first of all, just so you know, you never pictured yourself on being a model. I never have either. Let's
you
hear.
should try it. Say yes. Just say yes to it.
I told you before model. So tell us more about your business, the Live Edge Artistry. You create these live edge wood tables, and of course you're doing that from a foundation of sustainability and ethical sourcing, which is awesome. So how did you discover that you were able to do this? Like, how did you get into it? And then, like, what is one of your most favorite or proudest creations?
So I'm laughing because the way I got into it, it started off bad. Like, all these stories always start off bad, but I turned it into a good reason. So basically, I had moved to Florida. Before I moved to Florida, as you had mentioned earlier, I worked for Fox News Channel. And during that time I worked for them, they had given me a vehicle, and they provided all the money I needed for rent and everything else. So I had a brand new car. But when I moved to Florida, I was no longer with them. So guess what? They took the vehicle back, and I no longer had that money. So when I moved to Florida, I had no furniture. I had no car. And so I get there and I'm in an empty apartment. I'm like, wow, this is great. Okay. What can I do? Let me go research some furniture companies that I can go get furniture. And I started researching places. I'm like, man, this stuff is crap. I'm sorry, I'm being frank. It was garbage, right? And so just out of the blue, I said, well, let me see, how can I make this? And I just started researching it. And then I'm like, oh, that's easy. Okay, cool. The first table I ever made was a epoxy resin live edge table that could seat 10 people. And I made it in my garage that I turned into a wood shop. And that was the first big project I'd ever made. And people do not believe me to this day that I did that table by myself, which it's actually downstairs in my garage right now. But I just went and built a table. Yeah, no, I did. I literally just researched it, and it was like, okay, let me try this out. And I started making little things like, so for instance, like this is a serving tray made out of acacia wood. So I had it milled and dried it. So I have a lot of wood that was drying in my backyard for like 3 years. And then, you know, I would take them, dry them out, flatten them, take epoxy resin, put them in a little encasing, a little like mold, I guess, so to speak. And then I would make little designs and different things like that. But I was making these little things and people were like, wow, that's really cool. You didn't make that. And I'm like, no, I really did. And so people liked my stuff so much that they started asking to buy my stuff. And I'm like, hey, I'm a hustler. I ain't gonna pass up on making some money. Sure, you want to buy it? How much you want to pay for it? And so people started buying my stuff. I had a woman, bless her heart. She came to me and said, I saw your work online. And I actually just had it displayed in my house. So because I was a reporter, I would do different photos and stuff so people could see what was in my house. And so people were seeing the furniture I was building. She said, I saw your photos and I would love for you to make a table for me. I've been collecting seashells since I was a kid. I think she was in her 50s. She said, I've been collecting seashells since I was a kid, and I want to make a piece that I can pass to my kids and their kids. I said, yeah, absolutely. I would love to. I took 3 months making this table for her. It ended up being, I'm not going to say how much it cost, but it was a nice penny. She paid a pretty penny for it. And so I made that in a bench for her. This was now my second table that I'd ever made. And to this day, I think she just messaged me like 2 months ago and was like, I love this table. It still looks like brand new, like you just made it. And for me, that was just so beautiful because I was able to incorporate all the shells since she was a kid in the table. And it looked like a beach. So her table was acacia wood, and it looked like a big beach with shells and everything in it. And she loved mermaids. She was huge. She's like, can you sneak a mermaid in there? And I'm like, I don't think you should do that. And she's like, no, I really want a mermaid. So I said, okay, I got you. So I was able to sneak a mermaid in the design of the sand. And then I said, every time she looks at it now, she sees that mermaid. It's not blatant like a mermaid, but you could see it. And so I just was so inspired by doing that. And it was a great outlet for me. It was a great de-stressor for me. I was making some good money, and I'm artistic. Like I competed in art competitions since I was a kid, to the point where I got a full ride scholarship to a college in Tennessee for art. So for me, I just saw it as I'm doing artwork, and they're like, no, you're a carpenter. Well, actually that is artwork. And I'm like, oh yeah, maybe that's why I picked it up so easily, because it was art. And that's what I felt like I was creating. And so, like the tray I just showed you, I have different trays that look like beaches. A lot of the materials I'll get. So for instance, my newest line of trays I want to hopefully start soon. It's the Maldives line, and I have sand and shells from the Maldives I'm going to put in it. But ones I've done in the past, I use sand and shells from Miami. I also have some where I had butterflies, actual real butterflies in it, from Asia and South America. And so, just being able to incorporate these different things, it's living art. So you can display the tray on your counter, but when you have parties and stuff, you can break it out, put hors d'oeuvres on it, and use it. And it's always a conversation piece. Everyone that's had a tray like mine, they're like, no one's ever seen anything like this. Everyone rants and raves about it. They want to know where they can get one. The only reason why.
Speaking of which, if anybody in the audience would like to potentially hire you to build them some live edge wood tables, how would they be able to reach you to discuss that with you?
So on that note, I am actually out of commission for a few more months. I'm hoping only 3 or 4 months, because I have a back injury right now, so I can't sand. Mm-hmm. However, once I'm all healed up, if people are interested, they can go to my Instagram and send me a message. It's Live Edge Artistry. And, I've collaborated with people before. They'll come to me and say, this is the idea I want. And I work with their budget as well. I say, what's your budget? Okay. You want, if you don't mind how much you're going to spend, well, we'll give you acacia wood. That's going to be the more expensive woods. You don't want to pay that much for the acacia. Okay, fine. I have cedar wood. So I work with people's budgets, but I also want to make sure people understand this isn't IKEA stuff. This is a custom-made piece that no one else will have. So I've had a lot of people come and say, oh, I'd love for you to make this magnificent table. And I'm like, okay, great. That'll be 20 grand. And they're like, oh, I can go get that from IKEA for, $2,000 or $2,000. I said, okay, we'll go get it from IKEA for $2,000. And when it falls apart next year, I don't know what to tell you. People have to understand it is art. I am an artist. It is art, and it's something that will literally last a lifetime. This isn't thin wood. The pieces of wood are like 2 or 3 inches thick. These things are heavy. I think the table I did for a woman in Connecticut, that table was almost 500 pounds.
Goodness.
Yeah, that's not an IKEA, particle board, 2-pound table, and so, I wanted to make sure I emphasize that, because I want people to know what the expectation is.
If IKEA would like to sponsor our show, I just want to go on the record to say that I love IKEA, but I get your point. Listen, I want to pivot to the last topic, which is just a lighthearted one. And you mentioned the Maldives, and that's going to be your next line of live Edgewood tables will be about the Maldives. But you shared with us that you went to the Maldives, you swam with sharks, you liked it so much, I believe you did it 3 times. But then you had a little surprise when you got home.
Okay, you're gonna get me in trouble. I'm
Unexpected
gonna have the police,
friend.
the
Oh,
FBI
gosh.
gonna be knocking on my door. You transferring
Yeah.
exotic animals.
You're
So
not supposed to do that, but tell that story, because
okay.
that's a little bit of an interesting story, and do it in a couple minutes because we got to wrap it up.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Let's
Yeah.
make a long story even longer. Okay, let's go. So I'm at the Maldives and I researched it and I was talking to my butler because they give you butlers. And I said, hey, can I take sand and shells back with me? And he said, yes, of course. And so I had big old bags that I was dumping sand in bags and shells and I stuffed them in my suitcases. And I went through TSA and they're like, wow, your bags are really heavy. What do you have in this? And I said, sand and shells. And I smiled and they were like, huh? And they opened it and they're like, oh my gosh, you weren't kidding. You really do have a lot of sand and shells in here. You must really like it. And I'm like, yeah, I do. And they're like, okay, great. So they push me through. I fly home. It was like 18 hours. I get home. I'm too exhausted to bring my luggage up. So I'm not gonna lie. I left my luggage in my foyer for about a week. I didn't feel like doing it. So I finally decided, let me get my luggage out of my foyer. And I was opening it up to start to take stuff out of it to bring it up the stairs. And my dog walks over and he's sniffing at something and I'm not paying him any attention. And he's sniffing at something. The next thing you know, I look over and he's got something in his mouth and I'm like, what is that? And it was like this.
The audience that's listening couldn't tell what you were doing, but you were shaking your hands up and down and looking petrified. So go on. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was like this little thing with legs flailing everywhere. And I'm like, what is that? And so I said, put that down. And so he put it down and I looked and it's running around in luggage. And I'm like, what is that? So I had never seen one of those. I was freaking out. I took it to a local pet store and I said, what is this thing? And they said, oh, it's a hermit crab. And I said, okay, can you take it? I don't want a hermit crab. And they said, well, we could, but he'll probably die. So I'm like, oh, that's messed up. So I said, let me get him a cage.
Was he attached to you? I mean, why would he die at the store?
No, because they're territorial. So if they put him in a cage with other ones, they'll know he's new and they'll try to kill him. So I said, well, I didn't kidnap him and fly him all across the world in a Ziploc bag and then leave him in the suitcase for 7 days just to take him to a pet store so he can get killed. So I ended up getting a 60-gallon tank and built him an obstacle course all throughout the tank. Like I said, this is going to be the most entertaining prison.
Did you name him? Did you give him a name?
Yes. His name's Sun Siam. It's Sun Siam. And that was the name of the resort where I kidnapped him from.
Gotcha.
So I still have him to this day. He's upstairs, having a little crabby fit, but he's sometimes he can be, crabby, but it's cool. And so, so basically I accidentally got a pet
kidnapped
from
a hermit crab out of the Maldives. That's really the punchline of the story.
Fish and Wildlife will be at your door in 20 minutes.
Right. You see me walking out handcuffs. Breaking news, former Pentagon correspondent arrested for exotic animals in her home.
That's amazing.
We won't tell anyone if you won't.
I don't know
Friends,
what you're talking about.
Our guest today was the incredible and very, very interesting and let's put aside her adventures as a thief of exotic animals, Terace Garnier, who's lived quite a life and has, as we shared, and just again to take a moment to be serious, some really, really personal and deeply touching aspects of her life with all of us, aspects that I and PJ also shared about our lives. And I think it's inspiring and wonderful you're doing that. And if anyone in the audience is interested in hearing more, pick up the book, No Longer Silent. It's available on Amazon. I got it, as well as in bookstores. And we're going to invite you to write a little blog post, maybe even an excerpt from your book for our very popular blog, which you can find at www.bravingbusiness.com. We'd love to have you share some of your thoughts with the audience. We're really grateful to have had a chance to talk to you today. Continued success to you in all your endeavors, professional and otherwise. And you know what? Keep being brave. And that's maybe the most important aspects of this podcast. How amazing any one individual is. It's about how things are tough. And at any given moment, there are people out there who are struggling with something, and you can have an impact on their lives by sharing your story, by being kind, by being present, by being aware. Hopefully in this podcast, we are showing the way. You certainly are with the way that you're carrying out your mission. And I'm honored that you chose to share some time with us today. So thank you so much for doing that.
No,
thank you for being an inspiration.
No, thank you. And you guys are part of that journey. Look what you're doing. I mean, you are living examples of overcoming, and now you're spreading the word to help others. You're doing the same thing. So I need y'all to take a little bit of credit as well.
Hey, let's share the credit. I love it.
Yeah, really.
I
That's
love
awesome.
it. Thank you guys so much.